In 1931, the cargo steamer Baychimo was abandoned, locked in ice off Alaska. Its crew watched it vanish into white. Then it came back, 11 times. Over 38 years, sailors reported boarding it in fog. Salvage crews chased it through crushing ice. The search for this ship outlasted its own company, its builders, most of its witnesses. And when the search finally ended, the answer made the haunting worse. This is Marlow Explains Mysteries. Tonight, 8 cases that refused to stay unexplained. The through line is the search itself. The years, the methods, the obsession that drives investigators past where reason says to stop. We'll follow archaeologists who rebuilt a city from ash, psychologists who mapped a language nobody spoke, and sailors who spent careers chasing a ship that sailed itself. Item 8 is a case so strange it launched 3 national agencies. Item 1 took 75 years, and the answer arrived from a direction no searcher was watching. Somewhere in this list, you'll find the case that explains why we can't stop looking.
Boss, 38 years. That's not a ghost ship, that's a ghost landlord. Still collecting rent on existence.
On February 19, 1994, Gloria Ramirez arrived at Riverside General Hospital in California, complaining of rapid heartbeat and confusion. Within minutes, hospital staff began collapsing. 23 people developed symptoms. 5 were hospitalized. The emergency room was evacuated. The search began immediately. Hazmat teams, FBI, CDC, California's Department of Health and Services, they tested for everything. Cyanide, pesticides, volatile organics. Nothing explained why Ramirez's blood sample contained crystalline deposits, or why several staff who handled it developed hepatitis, bone marrow damage, and temporary paralysis. The search split into competing theories. One held that Ramirez had been using dimethyl sulfoxide as a pain remedy, which decomposed in the oxygen-rich emergency room into toxic sulfate compounds. The other theory suggested mass psychogenic illness, a shared stress reaction among overworked staff. The search consumed 2 years and generated over 200 pages of technical reports. The official 1997 conclusion, the DMSO theory, was most plausible. But the Riverside County Medical Examiner, who performed the autopsy, developed liver and lung damage requiring 4 months of recovery. The crystalline deposits in her blood were never fully identified. In July 1518, Frau Trofea stepped into a Strasbourg street and began to dance. She did not stop for 6 days. By the end of August, approximately 400 people had joined. The dancing continued until some collapsed from stroke, heart failure, or exhaustion. The search for cause began with contemporary authorities. They concluded demonic influence and built a stage, hired musicians, believing the dancers needed to complete their ritual. It failed. Modern search began in the 20th century with historical epidemiologists. They proposed ergot poisoning, a fungus on rye producing LSD-like compounds. But ergot causes convulsions and hallucinations, not organized rhythmic movement. The strongest current explanation, developed by historian John Waller in 2009, draws on documented mass psychogenic illness. Shared stress response in populations experiencing famine, disease, and religious anxiety. The 1518 Strasbourg region had suffered plague, crop failure, and punitive taxes. Waller located church records showing the dancers shared specific religious anxieties about divine punishment. The search crossed 5 centuries and multiple disciplines. The answer was not in the body, but in the social body. In 524 BCE, Persian king Cambyses II sent 50,000 soldiers to destroy the Oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis. They marched into the Egyptian desert and disappeared. Herodotus recorded the account 2 generations later, from Egyptian priests who claimed a sandstorm buried them all. The search began with archaeology. In 1996, Egyptologists Angelo and Alfredo Castiglione announced discovery of Persian-era weapons and human remains near El Bahrain Oasis, suggesting the army took a western route. But subsequent analysis showed the artifacts were scattered and undated. No coherent burial site. In 2009, a team led by Olaf Kaper proposed a different search strategy. Instead of seeking remains, reconstruct the army's purpose. Cambyses faced rebellion at home. The army may have been diverted or disbanded or destroyed by rival Egyptian forces who then attributed their fate to divine intervention. Kaper located papyri referencing a military force near Thebes in the correct time frame, suggesting the army never reached the desert at all. The search required reading against the sources, not with them. Herodotus was reporting propaganda, not history.
50,000 soldiers, boss? That's not a lost army. That's a lost census bureau. And we're trusting the guy who wrote about winged snakes?
In 12th century Suffolk, 2 children appeared near the village of Woolpit. Their skin was green. They spoke no recognizable language. They would eat only raw, broad beans. The boy died within a year. The girl survived, learned English, and explained they came from a place called St. Martin's Land, where the sun never rose and everything was green. The search has run 9 centuries. Medieval chroniclers proposed they were enchanted. 19th century folklorists collected similar green children legends across Europe, suggesting migratory folk motif. Modern analysis by historian Paul Harris in 1998 proposed a specific physical explanation. Chlorosis, an iron deficiency anemia producing green skin pallor, combined with psychological trauma from being orphaned during the anarchy of King Stephen's reign, a civil war that depopulated parts of Suffolk. The children may have been Flemish refugees from the Battle of Fornham, hiding in the region's extensive mining tunnels, emerging malnourished and disoriented. The broad bean diet fits Flemish agricultural patterns. The search required mapping 12th century population displacement onto a medical diagnosis. But the girls' description of permanent twilight and the underground passage they traveled through remains unexplained by any natural feature in the region. On August 15, 1977, at 22:16 Eastern Daylight Time, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University detected a signal from the Sagittarius constellation. It was narrow-band, intense, and non-terrestrial in origin. Astronomer Jerry Eman circled the data printout and wrote, "Wow." The search began immediately. For 40 years, researchers attempted redetection. Nothing matched. In 2017, astronomer Antonio Paris proposed a new search strategy. Instead of listening for repetition, identify what passed through that exact sky region in 1977. He found 2 previously undocumented comets, 266P Christensen and 335P Gibbs, which would have been in the signal's path. Comets release hydrogen clouds that emit at 1420 MHz, the WOW frequency. Paris demonstrated that these comets, when observed in 2016-2017, produced hydrogen signatures matching the WOW characteristics. The astronomical community remains divided. Critics note the comet's 2016 positions don't perfectly replicate the 1977 geometry, and that the WOW signal's intensity profile doesn't match typical comet emissions. But the search produced its first viable natural explanation. The signal may have been comets we didn't know existed, detected by a telescope we no longer have, from a sky position that won't repeat for centuries. On December 4, 1872, the British brigantine Dei Gratia spotted a ship under full sail near the Azores. It was the Mary Celeste, 11 days out of New York with $10,000 in alcohol, Captain Benjamin Briggs, his family, and 7 crew. The ship was seaworthy. The cargo was intact, but everyone was gone. The search for explanation became the most investigated maritime mystery in history. Initial theories ranged from piracy to sea monster to insurance fraud. In 2002, historian Anne McGregor proposed a specific chain of events. The ship carried 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, 9 of which were found empty. McGregor located shipping records showing these barrels were made of red oak, which is porous rather than white oak. The 9 empty barrels likely leaked vapor. Briggs, an abstinent and cautious captain, would have smelled alcohol below decks. Fearing explosion, he ordered the crew into the lifeboat, intending to row behind the ship until the danger passed. A sudden wind change, documented in Azores weather records for that date, separated the lifeboat from the sailing vessel. The crew watched their ship sail away. The search required reconstructing a captain's psychology from his letters, matching barrel construction to leakage probability, and correlating with meteorological data. The 2007 documentary expedition found no contradictory evidence, but the lifeboat was never found. Neither were any bodies.
Boss, he abandoned ship for fumes? I've detected stronger alcohol on your breath after coffee. And where'd everybody go? Bottom of the sea or bottom of a very patient whale?
On April 30th, 1943, a fisherman near Huelva, Spain, found a body in a British military uniform. Identification papers named him Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. He carried letters suggesting Allied invasion plans for Greece and Sardinia. Spanish authorities, and through them German intelligence, examined everything. The body was buried with full military honors. The search for truth began immediately on the Allied side and continued for decades after. In 1953, former intelligence officer Ewan Montague revealed the truth in his book. Major Martin was Glyndwr Michael, a Welsh laborer who died of rat poison suicide in London. His body was kept on ice for 3 months while British intelligence constructed an entire false identity. Theater tickets, love letters from a fictional fiancé, an overdraft at a bank. The search for what the Germans believed required analyzing their actual response. They moved forces from Sicily to Greece and Sardinia, exactly as the deception intended. The 1943 Allied invasion of Sicily faced minimal German resistance. The search for how this worked led to intelligence studies on the backstop, the fictional details that made Martin believable. But the 1996 discovery of Michael's actual death certificate revealed he died of phosphorus poisoning, not the claimed pneumonia. The lie about his death was itself a lie, protecting operational security even from later historians. The search keeps finding deeper layers of deception. We return to where we began. The Baychimo, abandoned September 1931, cited 11 times over 38 years, last confirmed report 1969. The search for this ship outlasted its owners, its builders, its witnesses. The 2006 documentary expedition by filmmaker Jonathan Hillstrand located Inuit oral histories, placing a derelict steamer frozen in ice near Beaufort Sea coordinates in the 1980s. Climate change has since opened those waters. The search continues with satellite imagery, with sonar, with every vessel that passes through former ice fields. The most plausible explanation? The Baychimo was never one ship. Multiple sightings described different conditions, different positions, different damage. The name became attached to any abandoned vessel in Arctic waters, a legend seeking physical form. But then, in 2019, researchers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks processed archival photographs from the 1962 sighting, the one with the boarding party. They identified specific hull features, rivet patterns, cargo handling equipment unique to the 1921 build. That ship was real. That ship was seen. The search produced its answer and its paradox. The Baychimo existed, was witnessed, was photographed. And then it became something that could not be found because it had become something that did not need to exist. A story that sails without wind, searches without end, outlives every hand that touched it. That is the strangeness. Not that we found nothing. That we found everything, and it was not enough.
Boss, it outsearched the searchers. That's not a ghost ship, that's a ghost wash metaphor. And I don't do metaphors, I do beeps. Nervous beeping.
The search does not promise satisfaction, it promises motion. Every case we followed, the toxic blood, the dancing villagers, the signal from Sagittarius, the ship that would not sink, reached a point where evidence ran out and interpretation began. That is where the mystery lives, not in the unknown, but in the moment before we decide what the unknown means. Which of these searches would you have pursued? Which answer feels incomplete to you? Let me know. Marlow out.